More importantly, thank you for all that you do for the University of Louisville every day. We like to say we're on a pretty good trajectory. And we were given a mandate from the Kentucky General Assembly 15 years ago to be among the nation's best universities. And we're making progress. And we realize that we make that progress because of you and your efforts. And when I say that, include students, recruiting great students, and the work of our faculty and staff. So I won't go through all this with you. You've probably seen this. If you've ever seen me give a PowerPoint, you've seen it. I use this everywhere I go. But by almost any measure, the University of Louisville is making a lot of progress in achieving our state and statutory mandate. And we know that, again, this happens because of you and your efforts. And we also understand that numbers are just numbers. And the real importance of what we do is the impact that we have every day on our students, patients, people within our community, and within our economy. So what we want to do today is talk about the proposed operating budget for the University of Louisville for the fiscal year that starts July 1. This is a proposal. We begin on the budget in the fall. Seems like we never are not working on the budget, but we begin the budget preparation process. There's various stages of the budget cycle. Preparation, we begin back in the fall. We try our best to have as much campus discussion as we can through the Faculty Senate, Staff Senate, Student Government. And as I often say, where two or more are gathered, Susan and Mike will go, or Dr. Willingantz and I will meet with groups. We met with the Commission on Status of Women, CODRA within the last week to talk about the budget. And what we're proposing today is what we call Scenario E. So it's the fifth, at least the fifth. There have been, I think on C, we went through C1 through C2, through C3 and so forth. But we go through different iterations, try to get feedback and input. The next stage in the budget preparation process is the next stage in the budget process, preparation and then approval. And the budget is taken first to the Finance Committee of the Board of Trustees of the University of Louisville. We'll do that in May. And then the next step and final step is entire board approval, full Board of Trustees, and that occurs in June. And then the next stage, of course, is July 1, the implementation of the new budget. So I'm going to go through some things, some background material on factors that affect the University of Louisville in the preparation of its budget, talk a little bit about how we approach the budget, go through sort of a skeleton of the budget, both the revenue and expenditure side of the budget, and then leave as much time as we can for questions, comments, observations, suggestions, or anything you want to talk about. So, or any elements supporting the budget. So if that's okay, we'll get started. Okay? And this is, we've come a long way. We've got more to do. And of course, without question, we face a lot of challenges. The biggest challenge we have faced in the last number of years, and will continue to face for a while, is the economic and fiscal challenge, and particularly the state budget. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. I want to show you this picture. I always show this every year. The horizontal axis is time. So this is January of 2000 all the way through. The most recent data that we have isn't July 13. It's actually March of 13. On this axis is absolute numbers of people, working in Kentucky. So this is 1,745,000, and you can see this. So this is the employment, number of people employed in Kentucky over a 13-year period of time. And you can see that we had high employment in the early part of 2000, the decade of 2000. We went through a business downturn in Kentucky, business cycle. We went into an economic downturn in Kentucky, and a number of people lost their jobs. Then you can see we had a nice expansion in the Kentucky economy. And in late 2007, we reached a peak of 1,869,000 people working. And then this was the recession of late 2007, 2008, and 2009. Worst economic downturn since the Great Depression of the 1930s. It was a national recession. It was a deep recession. It lasted a long time, and it had a pretty big impact in Kentucky. In fact, if you go from there to there, the depth, the trough of the recession, we lost about 120,000 jobs in Kentucky. Our economy is coming back. People are going back to work. And for the most, this is actually, I said March, this is February. For the most recent data, month that we have data for the Kentucky economy, we have 1,843,000 people working. So we're still not back to where we were, but we are growing and we are coming out of the recession. But you can see if you track that over to follow that line over, we really don't have any more people working in Kentucky today, 2013, than we had in 2006. Major public policy issue in our state. Now, why is this important? If people are working, they're paying sales tax to the state, and they're paying income tax. And the sales tax and income taxes in Kentucky make up about 75% of the state's general fund. So when people lose their jobs, the state's general fund slows down, it doesn't grow, and there's budget cuts. When people are going back to work, we would like to think that they're paying more in state income taxes, they're paying more in state sales tax, they got money to spend on iPads, iPhones, all those kind of things. And the general fund will increase, and we'll get an increased appropriation for higher education. It's supposed to work that way, doesn't always work that way, and isn't working that way right now. This is the state budget, and this is the revenue side only, okay? So if you go back to 2008, the first year, really, this is a fiscal year. The state fiscal year is the same as university's fiscal year, July 1 through June 30th. So this is when the recession hit in this fiscal year. But revenues grew 1.1% that year, okay? Not great by any means. And in fact, the budget was based on about a 5% growth. So we took some budget cuts right there. And then we actually, because of the recession, saw the general fund of the Commonwealth decline in fiscal year 9 and 10. So we're going to take budget cuts, and we did. Now, in 2011, we began to come out of the national recession, and we had pretty nice revenue growth. This is actual revenue growth for fiscal year FY11, and that's pretty good. But even though revenue grew 6.5%, we still took more budget cuts. And then this is 12, revenue growth 3.8%. The economy's growing. People are going back to work. They're paying income taxes. They're paying sales tax. We took more budget cuts. And here we are right now in FY13, and this is the current year that we're in right now. And even though we've had revenue growth for 3 years, it's going down. Okay, that's not good. But we've got revenue growth. The budget cut for this year that we've already taken for this budget that we're in right now is the biggest budget cut of any that we've had, 6.4%, $9 million. So let me go back a little bit. If you look at this downturn in employment here, the University of Louisville and the University of Kentucky took 5 budget cuts. And then if you come over here, state budget cuts. If you come over here and look at this whole time period, from there to there, we've taken 8 budget cuts. So that's 12 years, and we've taken 13 budget cuts from the state. That's the biggest challenge, fiscal challenge, that's the biggest budget challenge we've got at the University of Louisville. Why is it that even though revenue's growing and the economy's coming back, we're still taking budget cuts? It's because of the expenditure side of the state budget. And the state actually has what we would call a structural imbalance. Its recurring expenditures are growing more rapidly than its recurring revenues. So if you look at the time period, this should say, I don't have it up there, 2008 through 2014. So 2008, the beginning of the recession. 2014 is the end of this budget biennium in the Commonwealth of Kentucky. Kentucky is still one of the few states that has a biennial budget process. General Assembly adopted a budget in 2012, so we knew our budget for FY13, we know our budget for FY14. Now, if the economy doesn't grow the way it's projected to grow, we could take another budget cut. We should, because the economy is growing and so forth. But for the 6-year period, 2008 through 2014, state revenues will have grown about 2%. So even with those negatives and the positives, we've grown during this period of time, revenue in Kentucky. But on the expenditure side of the budget, public pensions have grown over 60%. So that's the defined benefit program for state government employees, for school teachers, and so forth. So when you've got revenue growing 2%, but one area of the budget growing 60%, something's got to give. The other area of the budget that's been growing over 40%, Medicaid. So when you go into recession, people lose their jobs, don't have insurance, more people qualify for Medicaid, that goes up. Medicaid is a combined federal-state program. For every 30 cents we spend in Kentucky, we get about 70 cents from the federal government to pay for health care for indigent, uninsured. Debt service has gone up. We've issued bonds. We've gone into debt to help try to keep moving forward through the recession, but you got to pay the debt service on the debt. Correction spending has gone up. It's really around 18%. And that's pretty significant because every prisoner in one of our prisons in Kentucky costs the state $20,000, $21,000 per prisoner per year. The state funds K through 12 education at about $9,000 per student per year. In higher education, on average, about $6,000 per student per year. So for every for every 3 prisoners, you could be funding 3 students in higher education. So that's the state budget problem. And again, because of that, we've been through these budget cuts. And we make no bones about it. Our budgets the last few years have not been good budgets. They've been bad budgets. They've been ugly budgets. There's no way to sugarcoat it. The budgets of the state have not allowed us to do what we need to do at the University of Louisville. 2 numbers, and then I'll move on to the budget of the University of Louisville that I want to leave you with: $141.8 million and $141.1 million. $141.8 million is the amount of private support that the University of Louisville is receiving this year. 141 is the amount, 1.1 is the amount of state support. This is the first time that private support has been greater than state support at the University of Louisville. State support at the University of Louisville is the 5th largest source of income to the university. Tuition dollars are more than state support. Clinical income to the university is more than state support. Research dollars are more than state support, and now private giving. So again, that's sort of a little bit of the macroeconomic background that we face. We always start the budget process in the fall, generally October, sometimes a little sooner, and we start by identifying our budget values and our budget principles. One, we want the process to be as open and transparent as possible. We try our hardest. We don't always succeed, but we try our hardest to have as many campus discussions, faculty, senate, staff, senate, student government, code room, and so forth, as I mentioned earlier. We always hear people say, I really don't know the budget, don't understand the budget. Last year, after we got done with the budget, a group of faculty in arts and sciences said, what's all the secrecy? How come we don't know what's going on with the budget? Susan and I met with them, went through the budget, showed them where the budget is online and so forth and so on. And it is online, but we want the process to be as open and transparent. We have as many committees. The provost has a budget committee that makes recommendations to her, made up of faculty, student, staff. There's a tuition and fee task force, or Michael, that's called the tuition and fee committee or something like that. They meet, and it's made up of student representatives and faculty representatives and so forth. And again, we try as hard as we can to get as much conversation. The forum is part of that process. So again, what we're proposing to, or what we're presenting today is a proposal. The budget, to the degree possible, is driven by the 2020 plan. The 2020 plan is a long-term strategic plan adopted by the Board of Trustees to guide the University of Louisville through the year 2020. In all candor, as important as the 2020 plan is, the 2020 plan says we should be hiring 40 new faculty every year. We haven't been able to hire 40 new faculty every year. One year we were able to approve 12 new faculty positions in the budget, but most years 0. We try to base our budget on realistic revenue projections. There's a lot of games you can play in budgeting. One, you can make up some of the revenue numbers, say we think that our revenues will be this from fundraising. We think our enrollment will be this. We don't do that. We try to base our budget on sound data analysis. We try to look long-term and make sure that the budget decisions that we're making at this point in time aren't good in the short term, but have detrimental effects in the long term. So we try to look out and make sure that the decisions we're making today don't dig deeper holes in the future. And based on campus discussions, again, this year our goal is to avoid university-wide layoffs to the extent possible. Now, there are layoffs, and sometimes a unit will have a budget cut, and the only way they can manage that is to not fill a vacant position, or in many cases, or in some cases, to lay off an individual. But we as an institution have successfully avoided campus-wide layoffs. Last year, there were layoffs at the University of Kentucky. It is expected there'll be layoffs at Western, Eastern, probably Moorhead this year, and I'll talk more about that and the reasons for that in just a second. We also identify our budget principles, minimize tuition increases to the degree possible. With the state budget cuts, tuition's gone up, no way about it. I mean, it's gone up pretty dramatically over the last decade or so. So this year we said we would try to minimize those tuition increases to the degree that we could. We'll talk about that. When we increase tuition, we try to correspondingly increase student financial aid to match the tuition increase. There are certain fixed costs that we have to fund, and we fund those first. This year, unlike the last couple years, our goal from the very beginning is to provide as meaningful a recurring salary increase to faculty and staff as possible. Last year, we were able to provide one-time salary bump, but we couldn't, at the time we did that this time last year when we were having a forum, we couldn't guarantee that that would be recurring. It is now being built into the base and is recurring. But this year we're trying to ensure that there is a recurring salary increase and the pool increase, 4% for faculty and 4% for staff. We're trying to avoid any broad-based fee increases. So say, well, we're going to give you a tuition increase, but we're going to come along and increase your parking or increase some other required fee that you have. We're trying to avoid, for both students and faculty and staff, that. And we're trying to maximize other revenue sources and other ways of managing the budget. And just as a reminder, over the last couple of years, we've been pursuing what we call a 7-point strategy for trying to manage the budget through difficult times. One strategy is like everybody. We've got to contain costs to the maximum degree possible. And so we've done a lot of things in the energy management area, the prescriptions with our health insurance program. And this year, we've done a lot of the low-hanging fruit. This year we're implementing 2 cost-saving measures, the voluntary separation plan, and also some changes in our purchasing and procurement procedures to help us generate some money for the budget. We're trying to improve our balance sheet and take some underperforming assets and make them income generating. So if you say, well, if we have such a hard time with the budget, why are we building a new building out on the Shelby campus? We own the land out there. We have no debt on the land. We can build a building. We can lease it out to outstanding clients and tenants like Churchill Downs, who've relocated their corporate headquarters out there. Since we don't have debt on the building, we can generate cash flow to not only make from their leases, we can generate cash flow to pay the cost of the building and to plow back into the academic mission of the university and back into our teaching and research programs. So that's just one example of trying to take underperforming assets, make them fully performing. We're trying to generate more clinical income. Last year when we were here, we were talking about the fact that the governor had just disapproved our full asset merger with Kentucky One, with Jewish Hospital in Louisville and St. Joe's Hospital in Lexington, Kentucky. We were very disappointed about that, but under the leadership of Dr. Dunn, we've been able to enter into a joint operating agreement with Kentucky One, Jewish and St. Joe's. And it's not as good as the full asset merger, but it will provide resources for our academic programs, primarily in the health-related areas, no question about that. It will also provide us with additional space for our physicians to see patients and to generate income, and therefore use that clinical income to support our teaching and research mission. We've got a long way to go in increasing contract research and income from commercialization. Again, we're continuing to enter into private partnerships with the private sector, use their balance sheet in areas like food service, housing, and so forth to help us moving forward. We're in the middle of a capital campaign. To date, we've raised $780 million over the last 6 years. Our goal is $1 billion by June 30th of 2014. And then we're just trying to be creative and find other ways to generate income. And I mentioned here our tax increment financing district. We activated our tax increment financing district downtown a year ago, January, December 31st. We got first checks from that tax increment financing district. That will contribute $2 million to our bottom line this year to help with our salary increase. So this is the revenue side of the budget. The good news at the state level is we're not taking another cut. So number one, flat funding. So when the General Assembly adopted the budget back last year, it was a 2-year budget. The first year, 6.4% cut, $9 million cut. The second year, that became our base. No new money, but no additional cut. We're assuming a 3% tuition increase for undergraduates, resident and non-resident. We originally, the recommendation made to us was from the tuition task force or committee was 3.1. The 3.1 may seem a little strange, but the 3.1 would have brought us up for freshmen and sophomore to the same tuition rate for the University of Kentucky freshmen and sophomore. We've brought all of our undergraduates up to the rate for their freshmen and sophomore. They have a bifurcated tuition. They charge a different tuition rate to their freshmen and sophomores than they do to their juniors and seniors. So if we'd gone up 3.1%, our tuition would have been the same as their tuition for freshmen and sophomore. We don't believe the Council on Post-Secondary Education will, the statutory responsibility for setting tuition rests with the Council on Post-Secondary Education. And they ask us to make recommendations on what we want to do to them, or what we want to recommend to them. And we think that in their meeting on Thursday and Friday of this week that they're holding at Lindsey Wilson, they're going to say to all schools that no school can go up more than 3%. Okay? So since UK's base is a little higher than ours, 3% of a higher base, theirs will go up a little bit more than ours. The comprehensive universities are saying they can't live with the 3% increase. They need a 5% increase. And Western is going to you make a strong case that their tuition go up 5% or that there'll be a significant number of faculty and staff layoffs. Same thing from Eastern. We're recommending 3%. Susan and Mike can go through the rest of the recommendations on the professional schools, graduate schools, the in-state, out-of-state, graduate, and all that stuff. We're assuming 100 additional full-time freshmen for the academic year 2013-14. Last year, our enrollment was actually for freshmen, and there's sophomores, juniors, professional, all this other. But for the freshman class, because of size limitations, classroom limitations, we've generally been trying to hold we have not opened the doors and said, anybody that wants, come on into the University of Louisville. We need your tuition dollars to help pay the bills. We've tried to build quality. We've tried to keep the freshman class to maintain faculty and staff ratios at a particular level, to limit the size of our important freshman classes like the English that's required of everyone. Last year the budget was based on 2,700 students. We actually, in the freshman class, we actually had 2,650. So this year it's based on 2,750. So it is an increase, okay? Applications are up somewhere between 16 and 30%. Doesn't mean that they'll all translate to admissions or that everyone will show up. Pre-registration for orientation is up, summer orientation. So we think we'll be able to hit those numbers. I mentioned that we'll transfer $2 million from the Health Science Campus Tax Increment Financing District proceeds to the budget. We're estimating procurement savings, $750,000, voluntary separation savings, $2,750,000. And then we're doing something not terribly popular, but for any unfilled positions, we're not taking the funding from the unfilled positions. So if in your unit you have someone that left, retired, left, whatever, there's a line there, and that salary, that position is funded. So the salary is staying, but the portion of the fringe benefits, we're capturing those, and that's about $500,000. So we're bringing those back in centrally to the university. And we can explain, you say, well, then what good is the position? Well, you've got the position. Sometimes you don't fill the position on July 1st, so you accumulate a little savings from the position. But the other thing is that we allow our departments and our units to carry forward any unspent budget from one year to the next, and there's a lot of carry forward within the departmental units. So the units have the flexibility to pay for that, and so we needed that centrally to balance the budget. And we can go into more detail if you want. The expenditure side, 4% pool increase in student financial aid, 3%. Health insurance gets a little tricky to explain. The insurance year and the budget year are two different years. So the insurance year is July 1 through December 31st. The fiscal year is July 1 through June 30th. So in the budget year, you've got two different insurance years. We've already budgeted, let's see, let me get this straight here. So for the insurance year, the insurance calendar year, from the part of that that's from July 13 through December 13, we've assumed a 5% increase. But with everything going on in the health insurance market and health insurance reform and so forth, health reform, we're assuming and told by our actuaries that health insurance costs will go up in the future. So we're assuming a 10% increase for the year that starts January 1, okay? And then debt service is whatever it is, and we're assuming that our utilities will continue to go up. We've implemented a lot of cost savings measures at the university, but the fact of the matter is we've added some space, some research space over the last couple of years that was never funded by the state. And as that space is more and more utilized and comes online, that jacks those costs up. FICA, Social Security, and Medicaid that we pay is going, the employer share is going up. We've assumed that. Increased participation as more people retire. $300,000 for retirement increases. Modest strategic initiatives will come back to that. Again this year, and somebody put here 14 years in a row. I know this is probably my 12th or 13th budget. Can't remember, I'm having so much fun, I can't remember which year it is. But we've not increased the supply and expense budget for our departments in any of those years. And somebody said, well, don't feel bad, they didn't do it before you started. So, and then we'll continue to, we do have some small but structural imbalances in our budget, particularly in IT and M&O. And so rather than sort of wreck the budget and bring the structural imbalance into balance in 1 year, we're trying to gradually do that over time. And so to address the structural imbalance, we'll be budgeting $300,000 for the imbalance that's related to IT. And somebody other than me can explain all this, but there's a structural imbalance in the IT budget related back to some of the PeopleSoft implementation and add-ons and service agreements and so forth. Utilities, $300,000. And again, we brought on some buildings here, the Clinical and Translational Research Building, Shoemaker, but really the Clinical and Translational Research Building downtown is over 300,000 square feet. We didn't get a dime from the state. Normally the state, if they authorize a new building, they'll give you the M&O on that building. And then state, during these budget cuts, said we're not going to do that anymore. So we had to eat the cost on that very expensive, it's expensive M&O because it's research-based. Same thing with our bowel safety lab on the Shelby campus. And that structural problem is $2 million. Strategic initiatives, the financial aid escalator. We made a commitment to student government a number of years ago. They wanted a fee. They wanted to increase student fee, an increase in the student fee for more student programming. We thought that a better way to do that was just to make it a budget appropriation. And the problem with the fee increases is the way the CP approves the fee increases, it becomes part of, in most cases, it becomes part of your tuition increase. So it was 6 of one, a half dozen of another, but we committed to SGA that we would increase their budget, but we would do it on a phased basis over 3 years. So we're honoring that commitment. The salaries cost almost, well, $9.5 million. Health insurance. As faculty get promoted, funding for increases or to recognize those promotions. Same thing with staff reclassifications. We have a climate action plan, made a commitment to reduce our carbon footprint and have some money for that. And then one of the initiatives that we started a number of years ago that we really hadn't been able to fully fund was the Conn Center for Renewable Energy Research in the Speed School, and we're making a commitment to that. And then these are our structural imbalances. So there's not a lot of fancy things there, no new faculty positions or anything like that. So with that, I'll shut up and fire away. Okay, thank you. I'll see you. Thanks for being here. Okay, who's going to be first? Joe, kick it off. Yeah, Joe works us over in Faculty Senate and in private. Yeah.
Is there an assumption that people on software people,
Yes. Make sure I'm saying that right. Yeah. The question is, this is all general fund. So if you're non-general fund, and that could be a lot. It could be research, it could be clinical, it could be athletics, it could be whatever. The assumption is that there'll be a 4% made available. Isn't that right?
Yes. David, some of the clinical departments on health sciences actually vote as a block to not give themselves this raise. We still require that they give it to staff, but we do allow an option for that as long as everybody's in agreement.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Brian, I'm just curious to know, one of the scary things is kind of like one of the scary things for me is just feeling like we operate on a boom and bust type of cycle, and I'm wondering what kind of planning we do so that when we have dips that it's a softer experience. And also, one of the things I've admired in the 7 years I've been here is how innovative you've been in terms of getting buildings built and that kind of thing. And I'm wondering what kind of innovations or creative thinking are you doing in terms of like different different resources for faculty and staff salaries, because it's not coming from the state, obviously. So I'm just wondering how you might be thinking that way.
Well, unfortunately, it really hadn't been boom or bust. It's been bust. I mean, well, no, I wish I was kidding. But Dr. Willingantz and I started 2002, and my first day on the job, September of 2002, there was a retreat already scheduled, and it was the deans, the vice presidents, everybody talked about a budget cut. And only one budget, state budget, since then was their new money for higher education, and that was 2006. So we were starting to grow that unemployment, coming out of that employment dip, and we got money. But then that was some of it was taken away from us when the recession hit in 2008. So what you try to do, right, is you try to set aside reserves and rainy day funds. And so we've done that. The board set a policy a number of years ago before I started of a 5% of your budget, take 5% of your budget and set that aside as a reserve. And so when it starts raining, you dip into that. We never got to that point. And then the budget, we never got to a 5%. So we've never had that real luxury. Now we have budget reserves, but we've been dipping into those and we've not been fully funding those. And Susan can give you all the details of that, but that's one thing. So what we had to do was say, we've got to accept the fact that for not only economic reasons, but other reasons, and this is an integral part of what Dr. Willingantz is working on with the campus community in the project, the University of the 21st Century. The academy is under attack for a lot of reasons. Penn State, University of Virginia, schools that falsify their data to U.S. News and World Report, like Bucknell, Tulane, these kinds of schools. There's just this thought process out there that we're not accountable, we're not accessible, we're not affordable. And people, I tell people, I think I'm exaggerating that, but between here and where I get home, there's all kinds of private providers, do everything online, and so many people question our whole delivery model of instruction. So we've had to think about, we don't see, I don't want to be a pessimist. I'm not a pessimist. Try not to be. But I got to be honest, there's days when you just say, how do we continue? But what we've tried to do is develop strategies, and you got to start somewhere. And we're starting today so that at some point in the future of this university, and I can't tell, it isn't going to be tomorrow. It's not going to be next year. It's not going to be the year after. But at some point, the university will never have to go through what we've been through the last 10 years. And so that's a lot of our strategies to find other revenue sources. And a lot of the projects that you see, people say, well, you know, in budget cuts, why are you building a new entrance to the campus? We were able to get federal funds for that. We applied, we competed, got federal funds. The foundation has stepped up. People say, what about the foundation? What about private money? When we started, foundation was putting $39 million into academic programs. Today it's, of the $141.8 million, not all of it, that money pays for the whole operation of our development and most of our alumni, but most of that goes into financial aid, endowed chairs and stuff like that. So, you know, fundraising, and we were raising about $40 million a year. Now this year we'll raise over $150 million. So all these things, commercializing and getting value from our intellectual property, the tax increment financing district, all of those are intended to provide a buffer. Are they a panacea? No. But to provide a buffer so that at some point in time, Somebody will say, I'm glad they did that back in the dark ages or back whenever. But, and it takes time. And so for a tax increment financing district, this $2 million, we worked on that in 2006. We got our first check from the city and the state in December 31st. And that will be recurring money, hopefully. It will grow over time. We've created another TIF in this area that will be more lucrative than the TIF downtown, because the TIF downtown is 200 acres. The TIF out here is 900 acres. And so those are the kinds of things that we're doing. We're going to have to continue to manage costs. And it's not going to be popular. There are a lot of tough issues that we have to face with what positions get refilled with the voluntary separation program, and how we might do things a little differently to save that $2.7 million. So in purchasing, that's not going to be popular. But if we can either go back to that first table and say, okay, we've done all, I don't know where I put my little machine, but anyway, whatever that, oh, here we go. You know, we could go back, just to go back to the start. And say, okay, we were told to be a great university. We've come a long way, and we're going to stop right here. That's a decision we can make, and that will be discussed as part of the University of the 21st Century. But I hope this campus will say we're not content. We've come a long way. A 52% six-year graduation rate is a lot better than a 30%, but it's not good enough for us. And we'll make the hard decisions and do the hard things to keep moving forward. Yeah.
Can I just add something? You know, we're trying to think also about some creative ways that would more centrally affect the academic enterprise than some of the things we've been thinking of. So, for example, there's a building downtown that we're looking at. We could either move some academic programs there, or we might be able to move some of the support structures, freeing up more academic space on downtown health sciences, for example. We could probably get that building much more cheaply than we can get a building that we have to build from ground zero. So we're trying to think that way also, because even things like space, if we're not going to get a new building from the state, it's not fair to tell the campus, well, nothing can ever expand. And so we've just got to think a little bit differently about things. You know, as Dr. Ramsey's pointed out, a lot of the savings from the voluntary separation will go into raises. You know, if we can hold on to some of that, that'll build us a little bit of a buffer against things that might happen in the next 2 or 3 years. But I will admit that I think none of us could have anticipated 12 years of budget cuts. It's never happened. And so, in some ways, the situation that we've been dealing with is something that no university has ever had to deal with. And it's gotten us a little gun-shy. So I think we'll be thinking of some of the things that you're mentioning going forward, because now that we know what's going to happen, we have to be much more prepared for it.
And we've avoided some of the things that some other universities have done, like opening the doors and saying, come on in. We don't care what our faculty-student ratio is. We don't care how many people are in the classroom. And I don't mean to say we're perfect and that or anything like that. But that's what a lot of schools will do just to generate more revenue, take more bodies, generate more revenue, and not be as focused on quality. And we don't want to be the biggest. We want to be the best. And so, you know, we take that pretty seriously, because that's what a lot of schools do. What a lot of schools do too is they really will start going after out-of-state students, because the tuition is so much higher. So that you can go to some very good state-supported institutions like the University of Virginia, and their enrollment will be 50% in-state, 50% out-of-state. And we don't think that is an appropriate model. So, okay, enough of that. Yeah.
This is a general fund question, but I was wondering if we knew how much revenue was generated by the Sugar Bowl and then the women's basketball team, and whether any of that revenue will come back to the academic side.
In answer to your question, the real answer to your question is no, we really don't know. Let's start with basketball. What the NCAA does is they give you so much money and you earn a share for each game you play in the NCAA. So we played 6 games, we get 6 shares. That's good. It's great. But what they do is they want to get away from all this pressure on an athlete, in the final game, missing a shot and calling it the, $500,000 free throw and missing it. So what they do is they pay out those shares over 6 years. So, yeah, we got 6 shares this year, 4 shares last year. That's 10 shares. 2 years before, we got, a share and a share. So, but all that money is paid out over 6 years. It's paid to the conference. We're changing conferences because we think it's in the best long-term interest of the university. There's a withdrawal fee. We don't know how much, if any, we'll take out of the Big East and what the benefit will be from our basketball success over the last several years. Long-term, we're convinced that the ACC is a better conference for us. It's more stable. That right now its TV contract is far superior to the TV contract of the Big East. So we believe that down the road there will be significant improvement in revenues for athletics. The Sugar Bowl has a payout. Again, it is paid out to the conference and then is distributed back to the schools. So same issue. The other side of that is they announce, a payout, and I don't know what the Sugar Bowl was even announced at, but you have to sell, and I don't know if it was 15,000, 17,000 tickets to get that payout. Anything you don't sell, counts against your payout. We had a phenomenal crowd. We had 30,000 people. The only problem was a lot of people didn't buy their tickets through the Sugar Bowl or through the university. They bought them from scalpers at the door for $25 instead of paying $150 to the Sugar Bowl. They bought them on StubHub and things like that. So I don't know what the exact accounting will be, and I don't know what our share from the conference will be. We have asked athletics in, I would argue, somewhat of a non-strategic way to often help us. So last year, this year's budget, we made a transfer of $2 million to make the one-time salary, to help us make the one-time salary increase. We'll open the Humana Gym for faculty and staff in our Get Healthy Initiative program on Friday. We transferred $500,000 from athletics to help pay for that. So what we hope to be able to do is get to a point of, and maybe there never is stability or equilibrium, but get to a point of stability and then work with athletics more strategically to see how they can, just like the clinical enterprise, just like the research enterprise with indirect cost recovery and so forth, can help support our academic mission. I would also tell you that the vast majority of schools that compete at this level heavily subsidize. And when we do, there's a student fee. And so I think one of the things that is an appropriate discussion is at what point does the student fee that was implemented in the summer of 2002, and just I'll footnote before Dr. Willingantz and I started, and that was phased in over a period of time. At what point can that maybe be redirected? So I think your question is a very fair question and a very good question. I wish I could tell you with more precision. I think that I know that we try to promote one university, not academics or athletics, not health science or Belknap, not undergraduate or graduate, not research or teaching. And there's still some cultural divides. We learned that in the SWOT analysis, that there's still some cultural divides between athletics and academics. There's a cultural divide between Belknap and health science.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. How will the new student recreational center affect the budget, both short-term and long-term?
Michael, you or Tom can answer that. The students, of course, voted a fee that will pay for the debt service on the building, and as I understand it, built into the fee is the operating cost. Is that right? If I'm wrong, tell me. But so you all can probably answer the question better than I can, but the pro formas would say that the fee that the students voted for themselves would pay for the building, and as I understand it, most of the operating cost of the facility.
That was built in on the original pro forma, and we've continued to work with the Vice President of Finance Office and Susan on the revenue as it's come in to see if that's lining up, and it'll continue to have to make modifications on the expenditures based on what that revenue looks like from the fee that's generated.
Okay. Yeah.
So from all the meetings I've had with Susan.
Thank you. Was one of the ANS faculty members
Right.
that met with Susan, and those meetings were so helpful. Thank you very much for doing them. But I think in one of those meetings, we talked a little bit about the separation between the athletics budget and the rest of us. And just from what you were saying here, it really sounds like you can ask them, maybe they'll give you money, you can negotiate, but it's really a separate
No, it's
kind of
not.
thing. So you do have control over it. It's yours?
No,
do
it's
we-
not mine. Nothing is mine at the University of Louisville. The budget of athletics is overseen by the University of Louisville Athletics Association. And I don't know how many members, and Joe or Shirley, help me out. How many faculty do we have? I don't know. 9 of how many? There may be 20. Now, I am, what is my capacity? I'm the chair. The vice chair of the Faculty Senate is the vice chair. So no, there is a board that oversees the athletics budget, and that board makes those decisions. There are community members. There are 2 board members of the Board of Trustees. There are faculty representatives. But they adopt the budget and they make the decisions with regard to both athletic revenues and expenditures.
Okay. So I guess my question or comment, I'm not even sure what it is that it still seems like it would be, it's 2 entities. You've got your side, and then the athletic program, is working in their group. How do we streamline the process so maybe it's less, or that we have more assurance that if we need to tap into funds that may be in athletics and may not be in academics, that we can get that? Because it does sound like, okay, fine, we've got a board, but it's dependent upon what that board deems as necessary for the maintenance of athletics versus the other.
Well, 1, don't underestimate our influence on the board. Number 2, the overall budget of we're focused today really on the tuition and general fund portion of our budget, our general fund budget. But the total budget of the University of Louisville is about $1.2 billion. And so a big piece of that is clinical income. It's the same thing with the hospital. But the hospital is worse because it is a separate board. There are 4 of the old hospital board. There were 4 members of the Board of Trustees of the University of Louisville on the hospital board, but we'd go to them and say, we want you to transfer $11 million a year in academic support to the University of Louisville, and that's what they did. There were some years they couldn't afford to do that. They provided, that was discretionary. There was direct program support for services rendered. So, there's pieces of the budget that, we have influence, we can have a lot of impact on, but it's a function of, how well do they do? If you don't generate clinical income, when the hospital couldn't generate the clinical income to make us a discretionary payment of $11 million, I think, Mike, they actually paid it in every case, but they would say to Mike, we're giving you $5.5 million this year, we'll give you $5.5, the other $5.5 or something like that the next year. So it really, in that way, athletics is no different. We expect them to pay their salary increase. We expect them to pay the tuition increases. We expect them to cover their expenses, their health insurance, their whatever. So, and again, that's just sort of, there's a process that we go through. And I think we just need to trust the process and respect the process. Yeah, Joe?
it's not a tax if you're buying a commodity, which is what people who buy the T-shirts and go to the games are doing. They're buying something that they want, right? That's just part of the cost. I take your point that there are a number of students who are funded through the athletic department, and I'm not refuting that. And I need to say that I am the daughter of a college football coach, so I'm all about the sports. My problem has been maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I think my sense is that many people don't understand how the athletic budget works. I mean, you're clearing some of this up for me now, but there isn't transparency on that. So we don't have it, in any of your budget forms where what the money is that they have,
Okay.
where it's going. That just having it out there that's paying for student funding would be useful, and then how these determinations can be made. Another kind of related question would be with the recent wins. What are we going to be doing in the future to kind of leverage that success in a way that potentially could benefit other students who are not just athletes?
Right. I've got a mic. Well, okay, your first point is very valid. The meetings are open. They're open meetings and so forth, but we understand we have an obligation to go beyond just saying you can come to the meeting. The Finance Committee, they have two primary committees, the Finance Committee and the Personnel Committee. And they're both open meetings, and then the meetings are open. And again, we'll get you a list of all the faculty representatives on there, but we can do a better job of telling people when the meetings are. We'll be glad, Mike will be glad, I'll volunteer him, because really Mike works very closely with Kevin Miller, who's the Chief Financial Officer for athletics. But Mike and I went down, when I first started in 2002, Mike and I went through their budget with a fine-tooth comb. And then Mike has worked with them over time with the eyes of the university, from the eyes of the university. But we can do more to make that transparent. Mike, is it online anywhere or can we put it online?
Right now, it's part of the university budget, and it's included in there. It is online.
So it is.
The specific athletic budget is not online.
Okay. Well, but we can do those kind of things. So I think that's a very valid point. Now, I've got rambling there. And what was your second part? The long-term plan was to get to a point of financial stability. And that's why this work around the conference is so important. The big money in athletics, and U of L's a little bit of an outlier. It is a whole lot of an outlier. Historically, the big money at U of L has come from basketball. And basketball revenues have paid for all the non-revenue generating sports, the Olympic sports. So basketball is paid for, football sort of pays for itself. Basketball pays for men's tennis and women's tennis, men's golf, women's golf, all the other sports. Now, as we've had success, and as we've expanded the stadium, our football revenues have grown. But the big revenue is TV. And it's TV for football. And the big money is being in one of these, what they call the Big Six conferences, the Bowl Championship Series conferences. And that's the names are screwy, but the Pac-12, they do have 12. The Big Ten, the Big Ten has 12, or going to 14. So then there's the Big 12, and they have 10. And there's the SEC, and there's the Atlantic Coast Conference, and then there was the Big East. The Big East, for all practical purposes, it's imploded. It's going to become it's going to be a non-football conference, and there's going to be something next year that we're going to be in that's really screwy called the American Athletic Conference. But hopefully we'll get over here into the ACC, and they have a bowl championship tie-in with the Orange Bowl. And so that means that what all that means is the Big Six is actually going to probably become a Big Five, although all this could change tomorrow. So where we've got to get is to where we have, we know that we've got an ongoing basis. We're part of a conference that participates in the TV money at a level higher than we've ever participated before or are participating now. When we're in Conference USA, Big East, the TV money for football was, I don't want to say it's nothing, but it doesn't begin to compare with these other conferences. So the leveraging is get to that point, and then you're at the very highest level of revenue, not just in basketball. We're very fortunate because of basketball, but also in football. I think the other approach is, to have these discussions and do it like we try to do any discussion on the campus. Do it from a constructive way. How can we work together? And we've done that. Dr. Dunn has done that brilliantly to generate more clinical income to support all of the academic mission of the University of Louisville, and work with athletics and see, is it a redirection of the student fee? Is it us going and saying this year we need $2 million for this, $500,000 for that, or is it some other model? And I think we can get to that point, and I think I don't see a reason why at some point we won't be at that point. Yeah. And yeah.
Back to a general question. I was wondering, who's responsible for financing the buyouts for the people who do take advantage of it? Is it the unit that's responsible for covering those costs?
Well, it will come from the funding. It will come from the positions that people are opting to separate from the university. So yes, it will be the unit, and the unit then will have the opportunity to come back and say whether it's a faculty position or a staff position, here's our case for getting that position back. But it may be that we say, okay, you've made a very strong case, but we need to, change some other things. This gives us the opportunity to do some things either structurally or organizationally different than we've done in the past, so that we can enhance some efficiencies and so forth and so on. So we'll have to go through that. That'll be a painful process. There'll be a hard process because everybody's going to say, I'm going to lose 2 people in my office. And I've only got 9 people in my office. So whatever percent that is. But there's some things I think that we can do in the Office of the President. We can restructure, we can reorganize, we can do some things a little different, do some reassignment, do some things better than we've done in the past. And my hope would be I'll only come back and ask for one of those positions back. So that's going to be the process. And it's going to be a little bit of watching sausage made. I mean, it's a decision-making process. I can't sit here today and tell you how that's all going to play out. But we know we have done a lot of research. We've looked at some other schools and some other experiences. And I'm convinced that we can come out of this stronger and continue to be focused on it. See, what we don't have up here, this is 1998. So the first year after the higher ed reform, and we got our mandate. That's 1998. This is 2002. Some people say, well, that's when you and Dr. Willingham started. Well, it was, but it was the first year of the state budget cuts. Okay? So compare this, 13 budget cuts, and this. You need to stand up and give yourself applause for being able to do that. That has not been easy. Now, we've got other columns out here. We'll go to the Board of Trustees in July this year. They're having their retreat at the Health Science Campus. So we've got numbers out here, goals for 2013, and we'll report how well we did. And they'll say, well, you met your goals or you didn't meet your goals. But then there's 14, 15 through 20. So in the 2020 plan, we've got more to do. We don't want to stay at 52%. And we need to be at over 3,000 at baccalaureate degree. We're an undereducated state. And we don't want to be at 3,000. And we've got a really overly ambitious goal for research, stuff like that. But we want to try to continue to move this forward. And I think we can come out of this process, and it won't be easy. And there'll have to be some very difficult conversations. But I think we can come out of this process and continue to move forward. And that's what the goal of this is. That's what we want to try to do.
On the slide that shows a 10%, excuse me, on the slide that shows a 10% anticipated increase in health insurance, I was unclear if that meant that employees need to expect an out-of-pocket expense additionally of 10%, or if the university would be supporting a portion of that.
Okay, the 10% is the university. Sam, who wants to answer the employee part?
Vice President Kirby has budgeted that to cover the expected cost. We're just way early this year to see if there's going to be any impact on employee premiums or not. That's largely the cost that our actuaries have said we need to set aside for the impact of the healthcare reform.
But did you understand the answer to that?
No.
Okay, yes or no? Should she count on?
No.
He doesn't know. Okay.
You don't know?
Yes,
Okay.
go ahead, Shirley.
Yeah, let me try to clarify a little bit more. We build something in, partly because our cost also goes up, but also to try to protect you from the full hit of whatever the cost might be going up. So that's what we've built in. Since we don't really know what the cost will be, if it's more than the 10% we've put in there, that would be a piece that would get passed on to you, but we don't know what that is yet. Is that fair, Sam?
Yeah, and the other thing that, I mean, it's us. You know, we're self-insured, so the cost or whatever we incur. But we've been successful. Mike, help me here, make sure I don't say anything that isn't exactly right. But we've been able to, you know, at the end of certain years have some, you know, where the what we've paid has been more than what the expenses have. And actually, our accountant said, well, here's a reserve, and you've got more in the reserve than you need in the reserve, and we've been able to use that to try to help out in some ways. But we don't know that, and really don't know that until at least September, October, somewhere in that time frame. Okay, who else? Yeah.
It may have been in a recent SWOT analysis or maybe a Board of Trustees examination of the university, I'm not sure which, but one of the weaknesses pointed out was the sort of decentralization of the leadership, a lot of the auxiliary areas of the university.
Right.
Are there any plans of those budgets and operations being more streamlined into the university, or do you have plans to sort of remain with the auxiliaries as is?
On just the auxiliaries, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so a little correction. If I remember the SWOT analysis right, the decentralization was everywhere.
Yeah,
It wasn't
that's
just
what I was
auxiliaries.
thinking.
So, you know, the medical school and arts and sciences and the law school and the president's office, the provost's office, we all operate kind of autonomously.
Right.
And that is part of what creates the decentralization, which means because everybody's doing things slightly differently, it's really hard to get one consistent way of doing things. So I'll let you take it from there. I just wanted to correct that. It's
No, I
not
thought
just
you were doing
coming
pretty
from the
good.
auxiliaries.
Go ahead. Well, in answer to the question, here's the way I would say, is with the voluntary separation, and coming back to the question asked earlier, it gives us the opportunity to look at our organizational structure and to try to, the decentralization is a long part of the history of the University of Louisville. In fact, if you go back, you know, we were the Jefferson Seminary, and then it merged with the Louisville Medical Institute. So we have a history of decentralization. And we respect decentralization from a decision-making and an entrepreneurial and an innovation and so forth. But there are some inefficiencies. And we have the opportunity now with the voluntary separation program to look at our organizational structure and look at it in the context of what positions need to be filled and not be filled, and look at what are the opportunities for greater efficiencies, which may mean that Shirley's got her operation, I've got my operation, we're in the same office suite. Maybe we start trying to combine some of our functions to realize some savings. So I don't know if that's a real good answer, but yes, we're very aware of the decentralization, and we respect the decentralization and the history and tradition of the University of Louisville, but we realize that at this point in time, this gives us the opportunity to try to centralize some of the overhead functions to realize some savings so that we can continue to try to move forward to the year 2020. Okay. What else?
One of the things that concerned me as a department chair in an academic program concerns me is with the voluntary separation that there are personnel that are supported 100% on soft money, and now with the separation, where's that money going to come from? Because you can't charge the grant programs that they're being supported on. So how is that for a staff member? Where's that 6 months going to come from? That was my question. Then I had one comment I wanted to make.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike. I think I understand the question. Are you talking about a voluntary separation of a person who is on soft money?
Correct. That's 100% on
Yeah.
soft money.
Yeah.
Rob, what we're going to try to do is to look at the total pool, how much money is generated from the general fund positions, and we would probably have to take it out of there. As we analyze the data thus far in the process, there's not that many positions that qualify for the early separation that are on soft money. There are some. So we're going to have to make some type of accommodation, and the way we'll probably do that is take it out of the overall pool.
Okay. All right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And then being an individual that's strictly from an academic program, as far as the athletics program, I fully support it. I think we're going to see a dramatic increase in the number of people applying to the university with all the character of the athletes, especially in the national championship that we had. I think people are going to look to come to the university even more. So I think there are a lot of indirect benefits that we have through the athletic programs that a lot of times that from the academic programs we don't really realize that will end up helping to grow and benefit the university in many ways.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I'm glad, because I was going to come in. We try to use athletics as, well, athletics, good, bad, indifferent, whatever you think, is a window through which people see the university. And so we try to use that for fundraising. We try to use that for alumni support and energy. We try to use that for student recruiting. We were at the Big East. We had students, we met with students who have applied to the University of Louisville, have been admitted to the University of Louisville, but have been admitted to other schools. Everywhere we go, we have donor dinners, donor functions. We do alumni things and all this. So we try to capitalize on that goodwill, that energy, and that positive perception, and to do some of these other things that are very, I understand they're indirect and don't add directly to the bottom line, but if we do our job right, they're very helpful to the university. They're hard to quantify, and there was an article in the newspaper yesterday, and guy, the pros and cons, and some people say, well, you can't quantify it. Some people say you get a temporary bump, but then, you sort of go back. So who knows? But we do try to, we understand it's just the way it is. And whether you like it or not, that's the way our society sort of looks at things. And but we try to use athletics as a window through which many of the people who we try to use it to broaden the window through which people see the university. Our goal, and I would not pretend to say that we're successful yet, is to get people whose first gifts are to the University of Louisville for athletics to ultimately be giving more to academics. Okay, thanks. I'll stay around.